everyone! Today I'm talking about how I get my Phalaenopsis orchids to rebloom. I get this question all the time from people, and so I thought I'd make a little video about it. I have a bunch of Phalaenopsis orchid types that are blooming at the moment, so I'll show you a couple pictures of those. As you can see, here's a bunch that are in bloom right now. The first tip I have is don't just add ice. I know, they all say that, but it's not the complete care that an orchid needs. And there are so many better ways to care for your orchid than adding ice. I guess the premise behind the whole just add ice thing is that the ice cube releases the water slowly, so the orchid will always have like moisture coming towards it. So in that sense, it does make sense, but it's a tropical plant and you're dropping ice on its roots, potentially causing harm to some of the roots. It's just not a good idea. And that's not to say that it doesn't work. For lots of people, it totally works and they swear by it. And even the company that sells the orchids, some of those companies, they swear by it, or they tell you to do that. So I guess it does work to an extent, but there's just better things you can do. So I'll tell you about some of them. So while we're talking about watering, the first thing I'll tell you about is when I do water my orchids, here's what I do. So usually the orchid comes in a decorative pot and it has an inner pot in it that you can take out like this, usually, but most of them do. So what I do is I take the inner pot out and I hold it over the sink and I pour water like from the faucet in here and let it drain out the bottom. And the other thing I do is in the winter when it's really dry, I will actually take it like this, pour water in it and let it sit for about 15 minutes, 10-15 minutes. Let it all soak up nicely, and then I'll take the inner pot out, let all the water drain out, and dump this one out and then put it back in. And then as well, I give them a mist every day or every couple days. I mist all my orchids with water, with filtered water actually, just to kind of simulate a little bit more of their natural habitat, which is a moist, kind of more jungle environment. Yeah. And the next very important thing to get your orchids to rebloom is light. And this is one of the things that's always, in my opinion, mislabeled on orchids when you buy them in a store. They generally say low light, which is not true. I don't know why they put it on there. I find that the more light, the better. They don't need direct, bright sunlight, so don't put them in like direct south-facing sun in the northern hemisphere. But in an eastern window, you know, bright morning light or just bright light, you can get direct bright light onto them and they'll love it. And in my opinion, they bloom way better if you have them in bright light. I know a lot of people will talk about a drop in temperature, so that they actually need a drop in temperature to start the blooming process. I haven't found that in my experience. I have them inside all the time by the window, so maybe just general drop in temperature in the house in the winter time might stimulate them, but I also have orchids that have been blooming for 2.5 years straight without a break ever. And they just keep on producing flower spikes over and over without a drop in temperature. So I think the most important thing is bright light and good watering. And another thing I will talk about is actually fertilizing. So the fertilizer I use is this one. It's by Miracle Grow. And it's a spray, so it's already ready to go. You don't have to mix it or anything. You just spray it on. And you want to spray it actually on the roots and the medium. So the medium being the stuff that the orchid grows in. So like the substrate of whichever kind you're using. You don't want to ever spray it on the flowers though. Like don't spray it on the bloom. Just spray it on the roots, the leaves, and the substrate. And I find that this stuff has made the biggest difference. Since I started using this, my orchids have just gone crazy, reblooming all the time. I know this is total product placement, but this stuff really does work. I love it and I swear by it. So this is probably one of the biggest tips I can give you. Another thing people always ask me is should they repot their orchids or in what kind of soil? So this is kind of a question that's doesn't really have a straight answer. Like I actually have orchids in all types of different mediums and they're all blooming. So in nature, Phalaenopsis actually grows on trees. It doesn't really need soil. It uses the bark of the tree basically and the moss and everything that's kind of in that environment to get the nutrients. And it usually grows in like more jungle or rainforesty kind of moist conditions. So it takes the moisture from the air actually, because it has these, on this one you can kind of see it really good. The roots are like aerial roots and they can actually take up moisture from the air. So they actually don't really need soil, and lots of people will grow them hydroponically or you know, something in between hydroponics and there's still like some sort of substrate or clay. I have some of mine in this like bark that you see at grocery stores, like the, you know, the bark type of substrate, and I have some that are in straight soil, some that are in moss, and some that are in like more organic type stuff, and they all seem to be blooming. So I don't think it matters. The soil doesn't really matter all too much. I think you can put them in pretty much anything that's labeled orchid soil or orchid substrate or bark or moss, whichever one you choose. As far as repotting them, I usually don't repot my orchids. I have done it in the past when I saw that the orchid wasn't doing too well. There's something that you can do where you take the orchid out of the medium that it's in, you wash all the roots, you inspect them. If there is some decay on there, you can cut that decay off and you make sure that the roots look nice and clean. And then you can stick them in water for a while. That only works if the orchid is dehydrated. If the leaves look really wrinkled and dry, that usually means that it's dehydrated. And I have rehydrated orchids this way, where I take them out of the water, put them in a cup with water. We'll wash all the roots first and clean up all the decayed roots. Then stick the roots in a cup with water and leave it in there for like a week. And that usually rehydrates the leaves. And then I would just stick it back into some sort of orchid soil or bark. And but that's the only reason why I have ever repotted orchids. Usually you don't need to. If you're feeding it with fertilizer, you usually don't need to repot them, because like I said, they don't really need soil. So yeah, that's it for my tips for how to rebloom Phalaenopsis orchids. And if you guys have any tips for me, or would like to add something that I might have forgotten, please feel free to leave it in the comments. I'm always wanting to learn new things, so I'm all for that. See you next time. Bye!